Today I'm going to have a look at the layout of the MPOWER board. So this has been done plenty of times before, of course, by other people, but I just wanted to talk about a few things that I like and a few things that I've noted about the board. So there's some great features on the board. First of all is looks. It has a matte black PCB which looks very nice. You may or may not notice PCBs. I actually never really thought about matte versus gloss PCBs before very much, but this is actually a matte PCB, so it doesn't have the gloss that some of them have, and it makes it look really sharp. In my opinion, I think it looks great. The only thing to note that I've noted about the matte is that the actual black, you may notice the contrast between the PCI slots and memory slots and some of those plastic slots versus the PCB itself. The matte, you can't get quite, it's not quite as dark and not quite as deep, so if you have it out in bright light, it actually looks a little bit gray in some cases, or if you're taking a photo of it and the camera exposure is a little high, it turns out to look a little bit gray. But overall, most of the time you're going to have it in a dimly lit room probably, or an average indoor lighting room, and it looks really nice and sharp in that environment. So it looks great. And the little bits of trim on the yellow, at first I was sort of not sure about the yellow when I saw the Lightning Edition cards and stuff. I wasn't totally sure, but it's actually grown on me quite a bit. I have to say, I think the yellow is a nice change from red and blue, and I think yellow looks good and I like it. I have the Noctua stuff for the rest of my case fans and all that stuff, and I think that it actually goes pretty well with that. And I think yellow also goes pretty well with military theme builds where you've got green and other sort of earth tones like that. One thing I will note about the socket here, you notice I have my Noctua mounting brackets on, and that's partly because I just didn't bother taking them off, but it's also partly because this latch here where you're putting the CPU in the socket, when you put a mounting bracket on like this Noctua one, I can't say for other mounting brackets, but just specifically the Noctua NHD14 one, when you put these mounting brackets on, it actually blocks the latch here to allow you to get the CPU in and out with the socket. So you want to make sure you put your CPU in and get that in and latched in before you put the Noctua or any other mounting stuff on, because it might block the latch and you won't be able to do it. Then you'll have to actually take the mounting stuff off and put it back on again. So that was one thing. The other thing is the memory slots. So the thing that's good about them is they have both sides. So that's nice because some of them, lots of other boards have been doing the one where you have the bottom is just a fixed slot that slides straight through, and then you mount at the top. That's okay because it sort of is less interference with the video card. But the downside of it, it's a little bit not as nice to get the slot, the memory slot, the memory DIMM in and out. So, but the thing I've noticed about these particular ones is the plastic they use is a little bit thin and a little bit flimsy, so you want to be really careful. I actually had, when I was taking memory out one time, one of these slots actually, the clips actually cracked, and it was not because I put any sort of undue stress on it. It was literally the amount of pressure you need to unclick the memory stick from the slot. That's how much it took to actually break this, and so I had to go pull a clip from another board and put that in. Luckily they're pretty easy to replace. All you have to do is the actual slot where the memory stick goes in, it's split into two halves, so you just take a a pen or something, preferably not a pen, but I use the end of a comb, so just a plastic thing, and you just press in and that sort of separates the two pieces of the slot, and you can pull this clip out and replace it with another clip. So that's what I had to do. Another thing that I want to note is the USB 3 on the end here. It's a right angle, which is, it's pretty standard. A lot of boards do the right angle, but the only thing that I've found about right angle is that the USB 3 header is very large and bulky. So in a lot of cases, your cable routing grommet is going to be lined up pretty close to the edge of the board, and your USB 3 header is very bulky. So I found that it's actually pretty hard to have the USB 3 header plugged in and then route it out the grommet, because there's just, it doesn't, the USB 3 header is not very flexible, and it sticks out, you know, 3/4 of the way past the grommet in some cases, or halfway past the grommet, and then it's hard to actually get the cable through the grommet. So the way it's done on some other boards like the Rampage 4 Extreme, they're just front facing, so you bring the cable out through and you do a loop, so it's a little bit less tidy because you've got the loop, but it's much easier to actually route the cable through, and I find that that's a better way. So you've got a lot of nice features. You've got a 6-pin power for extra power for the slots here. This is a 16-time slot. These two are wired up to 8 times. You've got 4 × 1 PCI Express, so you can have something above the cards. You can have 2 in between these two and 2 in between the next two 16s. So whatever way your card layout is, I'm sure you can probably find a way to fit your one-time device in there, especially if it's a short one. There's a double slot space between this and this one, so that's good for SLI, extra airflow. Along the bottom here, there's 3 USB 2s, and one of them is the power for charging. You've got standard stuff, front panel stuff, 2 fan headers down here, front audio. The serial ATAs, these two are serial ATA 3, so 6 GB per second. I believe they are a Marvel controller. And then there's 2 standard serial ATA 2 speeds. Some other boards like the GD65, I believe, which is very similar to this, have an extra set of 2, so they have 6 serial ATA 2s plus the serial ATA 3s. So they actually took a couple of the serial ATA 2s away in this case, so it's not a huge deal, but it's something to take note if you have a lot of hard drives. You've got the motherboard 24s here. These are V checkpoints, so you get little leads and you can put them in here and use a meter to check the voltages. Along here you've got some good stuff, which is buttons, OCG button, basically that takes the XMP profile of your memory and it will set it to that. It also will take your CPU and do a pretty mild overclock. For the 3770K, it basically takes the CPU up to 4.2 GHz in the few cases I've seen, and for me it does that. It may be different in some situations. And then for me I have the Intel Extreme Masters RAM, which is 2133 XMP profile, and by default it goes to 16, so when you press the OCG button it'll take the RAM up to 2133 MHz automatically for you. So you get one touch for easy overclock. You can also set in the BIOS, you can set your own OCG profile, so you can have that set up for whatever settings you want, and then when you push this button it'll bring the board up to those settings. Here you've got a reset and a power, which is good because sometimes when you're building the case, one of the sort of fiddly, more annoying things to do is get the power and reset buttons on the case wired into the board correctly, because it's usually very small pins, and it's just one of those things that's a little bit tricky. So if you've got your button on the case wired in wrong or something, you can always test out whether that's the case or not by just hitting power here, and if it does go on here, then you know your button's wrong and it's no big deal. Other things, you've got a readout here, a post code. When it's booting, it will give you a code here, and you know all of those codes have a corresponding message, and you can look that up in the manual. Once it's fully booted, it will give you the motherboard package temperature, or the CPU package temperature readout on here, so you can just have a glance and you'll be able to see the CPU package. I believe it's the package, but it might be the average of the 4 cores. I'm not entirely sure. This is the BIOS button. And basically how this works is you push it, and then next time you boot the board, you'll go into the BIOS. And this is good because sometimes this board in particular will boot past the BIOS into the Windows screen extremely quickly, and even more so if you've got Windows 8. So in some cases, the BIOS, the opportunity for you to press delete and get into the BIOS will go past so fast. The post screen will go past so fast that you don't even get a chance to delete. Or if you just say, oh, I want to go into the BIOS next time I boot the system for whatever reason, you can just give it a press anytime, whether it's off, on, booting, or whatever, and it will go into the BIOS next time. So that will actually remind you next time you boot to go into the BIOS and do what you want it to do. So that's actually very useful. You've got the BIOS switch here, so you get 2 BIOSes, and so you can have the original BIOS on one and your updated BIOS on the other, and you know, so it's pretty safe there. You can have any combination of BIOSes you want. It doesn't have the chip where you can actually take the BIOS out and replace that, but it does have the 2 built in on board, so that's good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to talk about. This has Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, but one of the things that I've noticed about Bluetooth is that the sensor is at the back here. So when you've got it in a standard layout case, it actually is kind of hard to get a signal to where you're sitting, sort of in front of the case. I guess because of the metal around the back of the case and all that sort of thing. So I found it kind of breaks up. So the Bluetooth isn't that great, but the wireless works well. So if you want wireless, it's built in, and you get a couple of antennas. One of them is just a little short antenna that you can plug straight into the back, or you can there's an extender, which is, I think it's 3 feet or 2 feet, and then you can plug the little antenna into that and have that placed wherever you want. All the heat sinks and stuff seem to work well. I mean, they're supposed to be designed for no airflow, so if you've got an all-in-one air cooler, they say they are designed for no airflow. So I haven't done any sort of heat benchmarks or anything on them, but I've had no issues. These MPOWER boards, all of them are Prime 95 tested by hand for 24 hours with a 4.6 gigahertz overclock. So on the board it will say OC certified, and that basically means that it's certified, it's been tested for 24 hours running Prime with a 4.6 overclock. So basically the board, the likelihood of it being dead on arrival is very low, but also it's also guaranteed to sort of overclock the way it should as well. Around the back, there's sort of the standard sort of stuff. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything around here. There's 5 fan headers, 4 for a case, 1 for CPU, and those are all PWM controlled. You get smart software and all that sort of thing. So you get 6 USB 3s, 2 USB 2s, a combination PS2 port, that's the Bluetooth antenna, the Wi-Fi antenna, you get the Ethernet port, which I believe is Intel, but I'm not entirely sure. On this board it doesn't have VGA like some of the other boards do. Instead it has a full-size display port and an HDMI and SPDIF audio, plus the standard analog set of audio stuff. So a fairly good set of stuff around the back area. So I think that that's about it for now. It's a solid board, it's really good, and it's also really well priced. So I can't really complain at all about this. The only thing I could say that they could do better is maybe increase the quality of the plastic clips on the memory a little bit. Other than that, it's totally fine. But it's also a possibility that the one I got was just defective. But basically what happened is I was taking memory out, I didn't press it any more than you would need to get the memory stick dislodged from the slot, and then the memory clip just cracked. And other than that, maybe have the USB 3 front facing instead of right angle. There is also a hard disk drive activity light and power LED built into the board. So if you don't even want to connect your hard disk drive activity LED on your case for whatever reason, you don't even need to. You can still see the HDD activity and power. And if you have it on a test bench, for example, you don't need to worry about connecting the test bench LED. If it has it, you can just look straight at the board and you can see power and HDD activity. So that's a nice feature as well. Small things, but there's a lot of small things that add up and make a really, really nice board. You can see here the contrast between the MSI shield on the heatsink there and the actual board. How much darker that is than the PCB. That's what I was talking about earlier. But in most cases it looks good. It's just a little lighter looking. You can see how it's a little lighter looking than the plastic slots and the heatsink shield. So the board is really nice. I mean, that's what I'm going to say. It's great price as well. It gives you so many nice features for a price that is really, really competitive and really, really good. So there's really not much you can complain about here. I would say that this is, 9.5 out of 10 is what I'd say it was. So I, can't really complain. So this is a quick look, or not a quick look, I always say that, but this is a look at the Z77 MPOWER motherboard from MSI.